Good morning. We'll start the meeting, call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is a request for bill introductions, and I have Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'd like to introduce RS 0847 pertaining to fairness in women's sports.
Committee, is there any objection to the introduction? Seeing none, we will introduce. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on the bill introduction would be Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce 21 RS 0633. It's adding identity theft and identity fraud to the definition of racketeering activity in the Kansas Racketeering and Influence and Corrupt Organization Act.
Thank you. Is there any objection to introducing this bill? Seeing none, bill will be introduced. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce two bills, 21 RS 0722, campaign finance, and 21 RS 0750, campaign finance relating to elections. And
Any objection to introducing these two bills? Okay. I think we heard Mark several weeks ago concerning these bills, so any objection? Seeing none, those two bills will be introduced. Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. A bill introduction for an act concerning sexual assault, evidence collection, and that RS number is 21 RS 1087.
Thank you. Any objection to this bill being introduced? Seeing none, the bill will be introduced. And we have Marty Carpenter from Brighton Carpenter Consulting.
Thank you. 1000, which is a payday loan reform bill.
Is there any objection to this bill being introduced? Seeing none, the bill will be reduced. Thank you. Are there any further bill introductions? Yes, Senator Clues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce an expungement bill, and it's RS 0835.
Is there any objection to this bill being introduced? RS 0835. Would you repeat the title to that again, please?
Expungement.
Thank you. Seeing no objection to this bill will also be introduced. Are there any further bill introductions? Seeing none, that will close the bill introductions. Today we have a review of the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund. And first on the agenda is our staff presentation by Matthew Moore of KLRD. Matthew, are you online?
I am, Mr. Chair, member of the committees. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Moore. I'm the fiscal analyst for the KDADs and state hospitals with legislative research. And I wanted just to provide a brief overview today on the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund. Before you should be a chart that details the expenditures and revenues for the fund going from FY 2012 to the governor's recommendation for 22. Just to highlight a little history of the fund, it was established in 2000, originally as the Problem Gambling Fund. It received a $80,000 transfer from the State Gaming Revenues Fund, and another $20,000 from the State Bingo Regulations Fund. In 2007, with the Expanded Lottery Act, that the fund was renamed the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund. At that point, it began receiving a 2%, a transfer of the 2% of the state casino revenues to the fund, which dramatically increased its revenue. And at that time, it was then added for addiction services for alcoholism, drug abuse, things like that. Going to the chart, I do want to highlight that this chart is reflective of what the governor's recommendation is as of today. The agency might have some different estimates, but this is reflective of what is in the governor's recommendations for the FY 2021 and 2022 budget. So if you will take a look at the final two columns, you'll see in 2021, there's a beginning balance of about 2.9 million and revenues of about 7.3 million. There are a few kind of accounting adjustments following that, but the last 6 items kind of get to what the expenditures and transfers from the fund are. They're traditionally about 6. The first being kind of the major chunk of expenditures, and that's going to be the state match for Medicaid reimbursement of substance abuse treatments. So traditionally in October and April, we do what's called the consensus revenue estimates and caseload projections. We sit down with the agency to kind of discuss caseload estimates for Medicaid expenditures, and included in that are substance abuse programs, and the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund does provide a portion of those expenses to then draw down Medicaid funding. My understanding being the ultimate goal is that it's used to draw down those monies. There's then a kind of a larger pot of monies that are then used for reimbursement of substance abuse treatment. The next item are problem gambling services. Those are contractual services to provide treatment for problem gambling. Right after that are administration. Those are administrative costs for the agency to kind of oversee the fund. The next is a transfer to the governor's office. Those are for domestic abuse and child advocacy grants in the governor's office's budget. The next item is for a community service corrections program. It's a transfer to the Department of Corrections for substance abuse treatment in their budget. And then the final item there is the KDAD's AAPS grants. Those are addiction services grants that the agency then provides. And that's the second largest sort of expenditure from the fund. And then unless there are any specific questions, I can kind of stand there.
Well, thank you very much. Looking at your chart, it looks like that in 2014, 2015, we were close to $1 million in the problem gambling services, and now we're about a little over $250,000 out of the $8 million we're taking in on a yearly basis. Are we doing a lot better in the problem gambling, that we don't need that money?
Mr. Chair, for that, I can touch base with the agency and get back with you on that. I know that there are several factors relating to kind of providing those service. You highlighted a need. I know there's also provider networks, but I can certainly touch base with the agency and get some information on you for that.
Okay. In 2016, Legislature passed House Bill 2739, and that asked that each agency develop and implement performance budgeting. And that includes outcome measures to evaluate the program effectiveness. I would like to see that for the problem gambling, but also for all the expenditures that you highlighted there. Are we meeting our outcomes? Do we have outcomes? It seems that our problem gambling has went down according to the expenditures, but some of these other programs are going up. So if we could give us a kind of an overview, not now, because I know you're not ready to do that, but an overview of the outcomes of each one of those programs and the program effectiveness, I would appreciate that.
Certainly.
Any other questions? Yes, Senator Falscadillo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What portion of the funds are available for certain groups that provide awareness or services to those with gambling problems? And those, is there any measure or any mechanism? So if a person is at the casino gambling and they go into the restroom and the little cards are laying on the counter and they pick up one and they call the 800 number, is that person then banned for a certain amount of time for going to the casino, or how does that work? And because I've heard in Wichita, the program there to address problem gambling, they have said that they've not received all of their funding to do, to be proactive and to address the issue. So can you speak to that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, I don't have any information specifically to that question. However, I can work with the agency to try to provide a response for you on that.
Senator Hildebrand and Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Matt, for your presentation. I've got a couple questions. On the transfer to the governor's office of $700,000 annually, what does that go to? How's that spent?
My understanding is those are grants for domestic violence and child advocacy awarded to third-party organizations for those sorts of purposes.
Okay, then what are the KDAD's apps grants?
Those are the grants for addiction services within KDADS. So those are grants that KDADS provides other entities for addiction service grants.
So $3 million of the $8 million is going to grants?
Yes, with the transfer to the governor's office and then the KDADS AAPS grants, those two are 4 grants, one within KDADS, one within the governor's office's budget.
Okay. And then my last question is that $3 million that the governor had allotted back, that we had increased, is that in the governor, and I haven't looked at the governor's proposed budget, is that back in there for this proposed budget?
I'd have to double check. I know that was included for a behavioral health increase last year, and it was allotted. I don't believe that the governor's recommendation included it this year. I can double check.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Peterson?
My question was along the lines of Senator Hildebrand's last question on that subnote 6 on the Medicaid mental health on 2020 on the allotment. The government says the funding was subsequently allotted by the governor. How the governor did not have allotment authority. The amount it contributed the ending balance for fiscal year 2020. Could you give me is that, am I understanding that like it?
Certainly. Senator, so last year, the legislature added $3 million from the Problem Gambling Addiction Grant Fund for a behavioral health increase. The governor then allotted that item in her allotment plan. However, because the governor did not have allotment authority over the Problem Gambling Addictions Grant Fund, that then just contributed to the ending balance. And then was not included in the governor's recommendation for this year. But that's why there's that ending balance, is because while she allotted the item, it didn't really have anywhere to go. It just stayed in the Problem Gambling and Addiction Grants Fund.
And that, for clarification, that was in 2020, is that correct?
Yes, it was approved for 2020, and then because it did not, it was allotted and just stayed in the fund, it contributed to that ending balance. So that's why you see that ending balance of about 2.8 million.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? No, thank you very much. Our next presenter would be Andrew Brown with the Behavioral Health Commissioner from KDADS. Andrew, are you online?
Yes, Chair. My name is Andy Brown. I'm the Commissioner for Behavioral Health Services, and thank you for having me here today. And we may be able to help address some of those questions that you guys have posed in the last couple of minutes. I do believe you have testimony in front of you from us, and I'm going to go through that quickly, but then we can take some time for questions. So for starters, just the history of the PGAF. This is a 2007 Expanded Lottery Act that authorized the establishment of our state-operated casinos and designated that 2% of the net revenues from those gaming activities be made available to treat both problem gambling and other addictions, as well as provide research to determine the effectiveness of program gambling prevention efforts. So our state casino revenues over the last 4 years have generated $30 million for the PGAF, which is managed by KDADS. And in fiscal year 21, the governor's budget recommendations included the $2.8 million that was just referenced as the beginning balance, and the $7.2 million in new revenue for a total of $10 million in fiscal year 21. Our transfer to the governor's office and KDOC, those are done as an allocation prior to KDADS receiving funds, but $1.2 million total is allocated both to KDOC and to the governor's office. The governor's programs, there's $700,000 total, $550,000 for domestic violence and sexual assault programs, and $150,000 for the Child Advocacy Center. And then for KDOC, they receive $500,000 total for the Community Corrections SUD treatment program. And then for the KCARE state match for Medicaid services, KDADS utilizes $4 million of the PGF annually to provide state match for federal Medicaid dollars spent on substance use disorder treatment services. This is increased to $5.5 million in fiscal year 21. And then for the KDADS APS program, KDADS utilizes nearly $2.2 million in PGF to support the Addictions and Prevention Services program, which covers SUD treatment services for the uninsured and low-income individuals. These PGF funds are combined with our other SUD treatment funds and represent a portion of the state's maintenance of effort for the Substance Abuse Prevention Treatment Block Grant. So in both cases, we're leveraging our state dollars for additional federal funds. So in total, the AAPS program provides $14 million annually in SUD treatment for Kansans. Then on page 7, there's a map of the Kansas gaming zones and the task force regions. So you can see the stars on the map represent the locations of casinos. The blue stars are for our state-owned casinos, and then the green stars are our tribal casinos. The black boxes around the counties indicate a designated gaming zone by statute. And then the shaded colored areas represent our 4 market regions for our coalitions and task forces. So we do have a statewide coalition, and then these 4 task forces that support the work of the coalition. So our problem gambling services and administration, these program dollars are the ones that KDADS provides the administration of directly. In this case, we anticipate that there'll be $950,000 that will be spent in fiscal year 21 on problem gambling services. We administer the problem gambling services, including our public awareness campaign, our prevention and treatment services, all through the work of 3 full-time positions within VHS. Those are a dedicated problem gambling team, and they support the 4 regional task forces as well as that statewide coalition. Our problem gambling services provide first contact, crisis intervention, and on-demand treatment for problem gamblers and their families. And the problem gambling program provides a helpline that's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, which is staffed by master level professionals. And then our prevention, education, and awareness activities are also funded by this program and include grants to those 4 community task forces and the statewide coalition. PGS provides services to approximately 500 individuals annually, in addition to our prevention efforts in each of the regions. And then on the last slide, on page 9, this is our agency estimates for fiscal year 21 and 22 based on projections. We feel that this is a good description of how these dollars are being spent. We've added a few comments next to those boxes to help you understand a little bit better about what goes into each of those line items. And I would be happy to take any questions that you guys have at this time.
Thank you, Andrew. One question I have is, maybe I'm not looking at this properly, but on the previous chart that showed the Problem Gambling and Addiction Grant Fund from 2012 to 2022, it looks like in 2021, we're at $263,253. And in 22, we have the same amount of money, where it shows here that you're at 600,000 in each one of those years. Where's the discrepancy there?
So Brad Weirdley is with me from our fiscal department, and I'll let him address that a little bit. My understanding, Senator, is that it's basically just a difference in how we've allocated items within that line item within our agency estimates.
And Mr. Chair, this is Brad Ridley, Financial Information Services Commissioner at KDADS. Our understanding, and we probably need to talk it through with Mr. Moore a little bit more, but our understanding is that we do have additional outside from problem gambling treatment services. We also have some other programming services and grants that are included in our problem gambling services line that we believe may be also included in the AAPS grants line on Mr. Moore's chart. So there's probably about $300,000 of expenditures that we have on the problem gambling services line that are showing up on the AAPS line on the first chart.
Okay, thank you. I want to go back to the performance budgeting and the outcomes. It looks like I say, we were at over $1 million in 2015, and now we're down, according to this chart, 263,000. What are our outcomes that we're using that money for to measure the program effectiveness?
Yeah, so for our problem gambling program, our PAP, or our performance measure, is the number of individuals that are receiving problem gambling treatment. And historically, that number has held around about 190 to 180 individuals, dipping down maybe to like 175 in some years. Last year, for fiscal year 20, due to COVID, we had some pretty significant dips in that figure. I believe that those can all be explained as being part of the public health emergency and the inability for folks to get access to services during the close down. But we ended up last year with 91 individuals being served. So that's part of the reason there's a dip there. But I do feel like we will likely serve an additional, 100 or so individuals in the next 2 years.
So on the back of the chart that you presented to us, it says PGS provides services to approximately 500 individuals annually. Yep. What does that mean?
So that includes our calls to the helpline and to the voluntary self-exclusion that the senator was referring to earlier in the conversation today. So we provide treatment to individuals in a number of ways. So there's outpatient treatment that can be provided locally here in Kansas. And then we also provide inpatient treatment at a specialized problem gambling facility out of state, where we have to fund the transportation and treatment of the individual out of state. So those total services combined give us that 500 number, which includes people that have called the helpline for direct counseling through the helpline, referrals that are made to the outpatient programs, and then also to the individuals that we're providing inpatient treatment to.
Are we seeing progress that those numbers are going down?
Yes, I believe that overall the numbers are going down.
Is there any further questions? Senator Pascal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on that same line of questioning, the public gambling services line, public awareness, so those services that are provided, so where at in the state of Kansas are those services provided, and do we just have a dollar amount that you give each program?
So when you look on that map that has the market areas, those are our targeted areas for marketing that we do to promote problem gambling awareness and also treatment options. So each of those areas receives a grant from KDADS to their task force. And then we also have a statewide campaign that we do as part of our Kansas Prevention Collaborative. So those efforts are conducted statewide, both by our beacon provider that operates the 800 number for helpline, and then also our direct marketing through the Kansas Prevention Collaborative, and then they also receive grants for local campaigns. Those local campaign dollars usually pay for the billboards and things that you see on the highway.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, but sir, is there a specific amount, dollar amount, that goes to each of those programs throughout the state, or does it vary?
Well, I don't believe that all 4 of the task forces receive the same dollar amount. I would have to go back and pull that detail because we didn't include it in this presentation. But I do think that each of them is awarded a grant based on the coverage area and the population within their coverage area.
So, and Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that, because over in Wichita, a really progressive, active program there, they constantly call me or send me emails or invite me there for meetings, and they're saying that they're not getting their full dollar amount to provide the services. So if you could just share that with me or the committee, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it'd be helpful to have maybe a list, especially to some of us who are new. And then in that list, when we're talking about performance measurements, what that looks like dollar-wise. And then I'd be interested to see what the out-of-state looks like and what the expenditures are. And do we have any feedback from those programs out of state?
Can you give us an update on those out-of-state expenditures right now, and then perhaps report on what was asked?
Yes, Senator. So what we can do is I can provide some written documentation for those through KLRD, perhaps.
Yes, if you'd send those to Connie, and Connie can get those out to us. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Seeing none. Brad, did you have anything else to add to that?
I did not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. For tomorrow, what is it? For tomorrow, we have a hearing on authorizing sports wagering under the Kansas Expanded Lottery Act, Senate Bill 84, and we'll hear from the proponents tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we'll have the neutral and the opponents for Senate Bill 84. So if there's nothing further to bring before the committee is adjourned.